David, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you.
Thank you, Indira. And Peter, welcome, and thank you for joining me today.
David, my pleasure. Thank you for having me, and thank you to Indira as well. I appreciate your hospitality in getting us to this point.
I appreciate you.
No
So
thanks to me.
we're gonna jump right in and let's talk about what we're gonna cover. So Peter and I have had many discussions offline about this, and we thought this would be a really good topic to bring up with the audience. And it really focuses in on some key things, and it's what's the impact of retirements in facilities management. Also, labor shortages. What's the current market look like, and how's it evolving in the FM workforce? And then the critical role of capturing institutional knowledge, that knowledge that only typically we see a handful of people know within an organization. And then the importance of field verified asset captures. And we refer to that as building a future-proof foundation, having that set foundation moving forward. And then also talk about some of the risks and benefits of taking or not taking action. And let's jump in. So the impact of retirements on facilities really comes down to aging FM workforce. I hear this every organization that I walk into, and it's I've got a handful of guys that know where everything is, and they're at the latter stages of their career. Well, what that means is when they walk out that door, all that institutional knowledge walks with them in most cases. That creates a giant gap in knowledge base within a team. And also the impacts after these key retirements on an organization can be catastrophic, meaning if you've got something that goes sideways in a building and the guy who knew how to fix that or knew where that thing was left 6 months ago, now everybody's scrambling. And it's a big problem at most organizations. And then we're going to talk about the transition risk in succession planning. And a lot of that's just not taking place. It's not available. And a lot of organizations don't have a process in place at all. But that institutional knowledge loss is a lot of this. There's stuff out in the field, not quite sure where it is. What ceiling tile do I pop to even get at it? What valve is up there and what does it serve? And then also that outside stuff and those little hidden things, like you see that water heater there, that's up in a ceiling grid. Okay. And it's kind of off to the side. And you know what? If you didn't know that that was up there, you may be tracing lines for hours trying to find that thing. And the other challenge that I often hear is this. It's what about the new person? Okay. The new person starts tomorrow. How are they supposed to find stuff? How are they supposed to respond and try and find that information? Meaning try and find that piece of mechanical equipment, that water heater, or that shutoff. And then it's a lot of this. It's call that one guy, call Carl. He knows where everything is. Well, I look at this very much so as that's a single point of failure. If one person or a handful of people are the only people that know where stuff is, what if they're out? What if they win the lottery tomorrow? So also, what are you going to do when Carl walks into your office, sits down in that chair and says, listen, I'm retiring at the end of the month. Okay. Or I'm retiring at the end of the year. We're coming up on the end of the year. And I oftentimes see that's when the cutoff ends for a lot of the team members is they're not starting, back on the ground January. They're done. December 31st is their last day. Right. So Peter, share with us, you've been in the industry a long time, okay? But when industry folks, they've been there for a long time, they've been working their buns off for years and years and years, and they get ready and they're retiring and that walks out that door. What's that impact? And what have you heard as far as impact on operations?
David, it's your summary there, as I'm sitting there watching and listening to you, I think what we talk about the aging employees, and you talked about it right up front, right? Because it's one of the biggest issues that we face tonight, if not the biggest. But like related to the aging employees, you have all these tangents that you just kind of went over, right? What's really succession planning, institutional knowledge, people walking out the door who've run that hospital. So what am I hearing? This week, as you know, Patrick and I have been visiting hospitals, been to 6, 7 different hospitals just this week, and everybody has this issue. It is literally not going away. Now, some organizations, though, and I'm sure you see this because you go to a lot of different organizations, Some handle it a little differently, right? They're a little more proactive. And it's funny what comes into your mind when you were talking about folks leaving. There's some directors of facilities I know who literally have the days on their whiteboard behind them, and they count it down day by day. And they've told their leadership, they've told their VP, I am retiring in 163 days. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's funny what you hear. A lot of times the organization, I don't know if they think the person's bluffing, but they don't put the wheels into motion to try to, to try to backfill that. They think somehow this person may stay. So, I hear lots of different stories, but the one thing that we know when they walk out the door, if you've not captured that institutional knowledge, if you haven't taken out of their brain what they know, you're in trouble because the person you may be replacing them with, and I'm sure you see this when you're working with your clients, may not have facilities management in healthcare experience. And that's
Yeah.
the key. I'll stop because, like you, I'm very passionate about this. I love talking about it, and there's so many things that can spin off. But when they walk out the door, the impact on day-to-day operations is a degradation of it. It's a loss of knowledge. It's a net negative to that hospital. And one last thing I would say about it, a lot of the times on the C level, not to pick on them because they have lots of important things they're dealing with, and facilities isn't always the most important. But when the C level has a problem in the facility and that knowledge base is gone, that's when they feel the pain. It's like anything else. When it impacts you, it's when you feel the pain.
You're spot on. I've seen those clocks. One of my clients from years ago, he had literally a countdown clock. It was
Yeah.
almost like a doomsday clock, and it was
Yes.
on. It was a screensaver, you know.
Yeah.
And it's funny to hear that, but it's true. They worked their behinds off for years and years and years to get to the point where they could hit that clock. And I think at the end of the day, it's as much of a passion for them to go on to the next step as it is a come to Jesus, so to speak, for the organization. It's when leadership walks in, I always think, what do you think? If you're a C-suite and you walk into that guy's office and you see that countdown clock, what does that mean to them? And
Right.
I don't think that registers a lot.
I agree with you on that. And I think what makes what makes the issue a little more difficult is, you know, we've come out of COVID, right? And I hate talking about it. It was 5 years ago now, but the ramifications are still there. And so, we're going to talk a little bit about, and you love data and you love you love getting out in the field and finding that critical equipment because we really need that. But, we're losing people. We talk about why are we losing people? Some of them are because they're retiring and they've gone 4 years over what they wanted to because COVID forced them. There's the Boston accent coming out. The other reason, though, is and I know in one of your slides you have it, they are burnt out and stressed because their infrastructure, their technology hasn't kept up with the demands. They're like, we don't have the money. I'm done. I gave you 35 years. I'm not, I'm out of here. And so it's a multifaceted issue we're dealing with where you can't just solve for one. Like you can't say, okay, we're going to have an influx of people. They're going to come in and solve it. Even if you had that, it wouldn't solve everything because you've got money
Yeah.
issues and knowledge issues. And that's why I love working in this particular field because there's so many layers of the onion to peel back.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. It's not about just throwing people at the problem. I look at it very much so from the standpoint of, great, I hire two people to replace the one person who knew where everything is. I equate that to now I just hire two people that also don't know the building, you
Right.
know? So
Well, and I'm sure you run into this. When I was doing the recruiting a couple of years ago, we'd work with organizations and they'd hire somebody and they needed a little bit of seasoning, but then they'd let them flounder. They'd put them out there with no support in place. And that's yet another thing we're losing when people walk out the door. Those support systems to bring up that next generation, it's not there. And if the organizations don't realize that, they're stuck in a cycle of recruiting constantly every year for a director of FM. And it always boggles my mind because they might spend six figures to recruit somebody, right? When it all comes out, you're spending six figures and they do it time after time after time, as opposed to maybe we need to fix the foundational problem. Maybe it's not a people problem. Maybe it's systemic.
Yeah, I think it's a churn for sure.
Yeah.
So, well, that jumps good segue to our next part here, and that's the current labor market. What we're seeing in the industry, and this is across the industry, doesn't matter the vertical, it's trying to find people. And you said that. I mean, it's when you're in recruiting, what's that spend on even finding someone? But then also some of those barriers. How do people get into this industry? How do people get into an organization as a whole? And what's the awareness of this lack of knowledge is walking out the door, but more importantly, that this is a career path, a legitimate career path. If you follow me on LinkedIn, I am posting constantly about the labor shortage and that skilled trades are a job, or not just a job, they are a career path. And not everybody's meant to go to a four-year school, and that's okay. And this stigma around you have to have a four-year degree to be successful is BS. Sorry. And that's not meant for everyone. And that's, again, still okay. But the skills gap between mechanical systems and digital tools in the field, let me kind of define that. It's the old systems that are out there. They're still running. A lot of pneumatic systems are still out in the field. And if you've got a portfolio of 100 buildings, you've got a mix of old and new. Okay, you've got new technology that's got sensors, it's got all the modern tools, but you've also got a lot of old stuff. The challenge is getting people in the door. If you hire somebody right out of school, they didn't even teach them about the pneumatic stuff. They didn't teach them about the old stuff. So again, it's a ramp up for the new people to understand. They may understand more of the new stuff, but they have no clue on the old stuff. And I hear this all the time. But also the getting creative with recruiting. And then what are some of those retention strategies that people really run into to keep the people that they've got, not just the people going out the door. But here's the other underlying problem. I'm teeing these questions up so that Peter understands and the audience understands why we're talking about that. And it's the 5-to-2 ratio. The people who are retiring, there are not enough people coming in to backfill those positions that are going out there. And there are thousands and thousands of open positions that are not just lost because of retirements. It's also lost because people just went out and found another job. I talked to a recruiter the other day, and she told me, the old days of when I look at a resume and you would almost dismiss somebody because they hadn't been in an organization for 5 years. Those days are gone. Okay. Now they're lucky to see people 2 or 3 years because they're getting job offers from other organizations literally up the street that are paying half again in some cases more than they're paying at the current organization. So why wouldn't they leave? So it's a churn. So I think it's critical that people and organizations capture the institutional knowledge because people come and go, they leave. Okay. And whether they're retiring or they're getting another job, it's critical to capture that institutional knowledge so it lives with the building and with the organization instead of just with a person. And Mike Rowe, and I'm going to blow through these pretty quick, but he says that all the time. It's the trade schools. It's the misunderstanding that this is not a career path for a lot of folks. And there's a whole bunch of different myths around it, that you're going to be somehow less happy if you're in these types of roles. I tell you what, if you're a plumber or an electrician today or an HVAC company and you can't find a job, there might be a bigger problem. Okay. These jobs are everywhere and they are paying really, really good money. And Mike Holmes is another advocate for it, but he comes at it from a little bit different approach. Is the lack of teaching any trades in our K through 12 systems is fallen off. Okay. And Peter, have you seen this at some of your organizations that you've talked to as well? And what are you hearing from the different orgs that you're meeting with?
Gosh, David, you did it again because there's just so that's why I was writing some stuff down as you were talking because there's so much meat on the bone, like in everything you've just talked about. It's funny. I'll just start with kind of the Mike Holmes and with the organizations. Yeah, we're down here. I'm not going to say the state we're at, but we were talking the last couple of days about the trades and how, sometimes organizations have the misconception, and I say misconception, that hospitals are competing against just hospitals for salaries for your electricians, your plumbers, for your skilled trade, and you're not. You're competing against a whole world outside. You're competing against healthcare, but you're competing against everything else. It's pharmaceuticals, gas, leisure industry, hotels. Everybody needs the same talent. And
Yeah.
when you talk about, like, I think sometimes organizations, they need to look at the new reality of it, right? And you can't just say, okay, I did a salary comparison. We compared entry-level plumber against all the hospitals in our area. You can do that, but you're not going to get the people you want. You can console yourself and say we're competitive, but you're not competitive against everybody else. And it's a huge issue. I I I want to say just one other thing, going back to a way I think to like solve for this, because you hit on it and we hit on it talking about the competition that's out there. As you know, just a brief plug, we started the Healthcare Facilities Network, our YouTube channel. You've been on it a couple of times. We started it. I started it when I was recruiting. We're doing it at Creft because we're losing people and we needed to publicize the opportunity. I dropped a episode, Ryan Coney, and he gave me the okay to say this. They at Atrium in Wisconsin have a great program that they've developed, and it's called Intern to Apprentice. And I'm not going to go into all the details, but I think while it works, David, is because they are reaching down into the colleges. They're integrating what you said, they're integrating a healthcare facilities management track accompanied with the tradespeople working in the hospital at the same time. So they're putting to work what they're learning. But the important thing, and why I thought it was brilliant, is as you know, we lose people coming out of college because healthcare can't compete on salaries. And the other big problem, people don't even know this career exists.
Right.
So the Ryan program, the advocate program brings kids in, and I say kids, young adults, before they know another world exists. And the people who are really good in healthcare facilities management are very passionate about it. They connect to the patient. They connect to the greater good they're doing. And this program, whether they wanted this to be an outcome of it or not, is sucking these college students in so that they don't even go and look at other industries because you've already got them. And it creates that career path for them. And I think it's a brilliant program. And as I said, Ryan is ready to, evangelize for it. And I think we need to do a little more of that. That's why this slide is, I think, so important. We need to reach down because we're not going to compete and win at mid-career people, especially with
Right.
the trades.
It's so many different organizations are trying, and that's the
They
only way
are.
I can put it. They're trying to recruit. They're trying to do internal career ladder programs. And I've heard several different organizations I've met over the years, and I've interviewed several about similar things on the podcast. And they're all just trying to figure it out. But like you said, they're all competing for the same people. Now, healthcare is a little bit different because it's not like you're just hiring somebody off the street typically that knows med gas. Okay. But I've talked to, I can't tell you how many healthcare organizations that they're hiring more entry level people and training them within because they can't find those people. If they post for somebody who knows med gas, they're going to get nobody who applies or two. Okay. And the challenge is that, like you said, it's not just the hospital to hospital, it's the hospital's also competing, trying to find the same electrician that the school district is, or the higher ed institution, or like you said, pharma. But also so are the contractors, the general contractors. I
Forget about
talked to,
that.
yeah, I've talked to people that are trying to find people that they went back into construction because they're chasing the money, and it's not their fault. That's their family. they're
Sure.
trying to support. And when they're getting, I mean, I've talked to electricians that got an $8 an hour raise to just switch a job. Why wouldn't he take that job?
Agreed. Agreed.
So go
Can I
ahead,
go
please.
just quickly? I know you made the comment like about the 4-year degree, and we've talked about this before, and I just really wanted to hit on that. I think we've done a disservice to the folks beneath. We've put such a focus on getting your 4-year degree. That's the only way to success. You got to get your degree, and if you don't have your degree, then you're not going to be successful. And it's just so wrong, and we've passed that message down. And when I was doing the recruiting, I would get a little more frustrated because I would work with organizations and I'd put forward a director of FM who's got 20 to 25 years of experience working in a hospital, got the certifications, worked in a trade, and the organization wouldn't look at them because they didn't have their degree. And I'd say,
Right.
why not at least look at them? And the answer would always, well, because that's the way we do it. Like, and you can't be black and white. We have to live in the gray these days. We just don't have enough people.
That's right. No, that's right. And we're jumping into the next part here, and it's trying to find those people. And a lot of the challenges are there are only a certain number of colleges around or a certain number of trade schools around, and they're not coming up fast enough to backfill. And IFMA predicts that between 50 and 100,000 FM jobs will be open over the next 5 to 10 years. That's a big number. All right. And if there's not enough people, what that means is now I'm either going to be paying a ton of overtime or I'm going to be outsourcing. Well, those same outsourced organizations are trying to find the same people you are. So you're already competing with your vendor to find people as well. And these are some of those jobs, welders, carpenters, plumbers. I mean, these are just some of the jobs that everybody's trying to backfill. You see HVAC, electricians, all these same organizations are fighting to try and find the same groups. But here's the other thing, and you touched on this. Leadership doesn't understand what that means to an organization in most cases. All they know is if something breaks, I call this number, I reach out to this guy, and he gets it fixed. But if you don't have enough people to fix it, there's delays. And the challenge is also, and we've done a whole series of webinars and also, or I'm sorry, of podcast recordings, as well as we had a whole series on this. What's your outreach for women? That's half the population. Okay. And there's a big number. I'm starting to see a really big number of organizations that are starting to hire from within too, in different areas within their organization and moving them into facilities and maintenance. That's a big deal. I think that can really help with this as well. But again, we talked about the difficulty, and I'm going to kind of skip over this because the difficulty in organizations is trying to find those people. But Peter, capturing that institutional knowledge is the next step here. Okay. And what I'm going to jump in here, I want your insights on this is, what counts as that institutional knowledge, and what is that knowledge capper? What way do you do that? What are organizations doing to capture that? And also building that into your resiliency of your organization. And so it's repeatable. And it's cross-training with different groups within your own organization to maximize and get those multi-threaded areas where people can help out within the organization. But also the organizations that go ahead and with the retirement and have true succession plans. And what's your role on this? And what are your thoughts on how to capture that institutional knowledge? I know how we do it, and I'll share that, but how are you guys seeing that organizations are doing that?
Wow. Gosh, it's a loaded question. I mean, this, there are some organizations that literally don't capture that institutional knowledge. And I don't have, I can't quantify that, but I mean, I know it from working with folks, right? That they literally don't. I think sometimes we look for a magic solution to some of these things. And technology can help, absolutely can help. But sometimes it's also kind of like grassroots. What don't we know? Like getting to the foundation, because technology can assist, but at the end of the day, the knowledge is in the people. And unless you get that out of them, you don't have it. And there's two ends of the spectrum here. I was talking to a VP of FM who's going to be retiring at the end of this year. and has a great deal of institutional knowledge, is that go-to person. It's VP of FM, but if it's a PDC issue, EOC issue, they go to this VP because they have it all. What's happened with that? They've tried to do some succession planning, but there's been so much staff turnover. And then when you have a technology to implement, and you can talk to this, I'm sure, better than I was talking to just this week out in the field, we were talking about some of the issues, and C-level leadership wants to help by deploying technologies that can assist. But the frustration this person was telling me, when it comes time to actually do it, there's pushback and I can't get the funding for it. Right. And so again, it's what makes this issue so difficult to solve for. We were working when I was doing recruiting at the University of Nebraska Medical Center, and we were talking to the chancellor, and he gave a quote that I use to this day because I love it. And I think it helps to answer your question. If you've seen one hospital, you've seen one hospital. They're all different. They're all at different stages. But I think what works, and then I'll stop talking and chime in. I think that one of the ways to help solve that, though, and again, to get to the foundation of it, knowing that we have mixed staff competencies. We have the boomers who know everything, but they're retiring. And then we're bringing in the younger folks who maybe are eager and want to learn, but they're not there yet. We need to pair the boomers, I say that, I don't mean that way. We need to pair out in the field the folks who know it with the folks who are coming in, by making time for it, by bringing them out in the field, by showing what they know. And I think what that does is, we always talk about generational differences and, we all learn differently, but by pairing these together, you're starting to capture that critical knowledge. You're starting to capture, okay, we can get to a data solution. We can get to a technical solution because it's out of Bob's head. And you're training that next generation. There has to be a pairing. The issue we run into is time. None of them have time, right? So again, as we talk about peeling back the onion, even when there are solutions, sometimes there's not the time, the money, or the organizational support. I'm not sure I answered your question, but you're seeing everything out there, and the VP who's retiring, they're going to keep this person on part-time. When they're done working, that's when they're going to suck the knowledge out of the head and try to, and that's not a bad solution, because they're still there and you can still capture some of that critical knowledge. Because a lot of places, like you said, they don't even have documentation.
Yeah, it's a struggle. I mean, I hear that same thing from organizations all the time. And I've heard that quote before too, where, if you've been in one building, you've been in one building. You haven't been in my building. That's what I hear that. It's your buildings that you were in the past were your old buildings. That's not my building. And my stuff's different, and my stuff's all over the place. And the challenge is that it is, what's the method? How do you capture that? I know when I'm out in the field with our teams and we're capturing stuff, and I always tell people, why aren't you providing them a tool that they can do that? And I think a lot of organizations don't understand that. When I'm up on a ladder, you and I were talking before the recording here, I was on a ladder and I'm up in the ceiling grid, and I'm capturing, FCUs that are up in the grid at a stadium, and I'm taking pictures of it. I'm documenting what rooms it in, what floors it on, where what suites it in, and make, model, serial number, all of those details, because they had nothing. And again, it's because the guys that were, knew where all that stuff were, they were a third-party contractor. Now they pulled it all in. So now they're doing it all in-house. And all that institutional knowledge didn't just walk with one guy, it walked with an entire team. So now they're pulling it all in. So, it's done, thank goodness. But again, I think about a hospital, or I think about a school that's in the same boat. And if you haven't got a tool that, they pull their phone out of their pocket and they can document it while they're standing on the ladder, then those are missed opportunities.
David, again, just a quick question. Sorry if you don't mind. Now, you're out in the field quite a bit. One of the things, that kind of worries me about institutional knowledge from the healthcare perspective is kind of the risk that's on the hospital
That's right.
And they may not, I mean, they know they have risk, but they may not understand the true risk. You must have, without, obviously you can't name it, but is that like you're out there working with folks in the field of all different backgrounds and knowledge bases. Is that a concern for you as you think about as we're going down this healthcare road, this hospital road, the next 5, 10 years?
I think the risk is growing, and I think it's the institutional knowledge loss is potentially catastrophic for an organization. Because think about that. If I have an incident that happens in my facility and one of the guy in the upper left-hand corner of the screen right now is the one guy who knows where that isolation valve is for the ORs. Okay. And all of a sudden a pipe burst, and you know as well as I do, a lot of the hospitals are old, a lot of the schools are old, and old systems are in those hospitals, and something bursts. If I lose the ORs for a week, or I lose the ORs for days, that can be a snowball of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage. And you mentioned it earlier, it's time. Though I look at water as it's a time bomb. Longer it runs, more damage. I mean, that's just the way it is. We actually just met with another client that had a toilet leak, okay, and it leaked for a long time, right? And it was leaking in the wall. The water leaked so bad, Peter, the water went down into elevator shafts. Okay, think about that. And it wasn't even the elevators; they weren't up in the air. All the elevators were down, and all the elevator equipment got flooded out. I mean, it doesn't take long for something to go sideways. Well, leadership, they don't understand, a leaking toilet can cause that kind of damage. They're not in facilities. So the risk associated, I think where it's really important is to educate leadership and have those constant conversations with leadership so that they understand, listen, if something goes sideways and if this happens, it's not just a number on a spreadsheet that says we need to replace this equipment or we need to do X. Okay, the reason I'm asking is the impact and the risk on our organization is here. And not just spell it out, take a picture, document. If we lose this unit, it's this. This is the impact on our organization, because then it's real, it's tangible. They'll understand loss and risk when you put it into real terms that they understand. They're not going to understand that, the pressures of this, or, we're running this at energy efficient this or that. That doesn't matter to them. What matters is we're down.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you talked about a picture. A picture is worth 1,000 words. People understand pictures. And then the other thing too, the season directors, hey, they will give that information. They will document it. They will provide it to their leadership. So at least, okay, if something goes wrong, you knew about it.
That's exactly
I
it.
did my job.
That's
I can't
exactly
do
it.
anymore.
Yeah. And, part of that knowledge capture we're talking about, and then sharing this information out even with leadership or my team, is the lack of information in the field. Guys are in the field all the time. And when they're hunting for stuff, it's a time suck on a team that's already stretched thin. And I just had this conversation with a prospective client, hospital, and they were talking about tracing lines. So one line drawings, they got mains mapped out on a paper plan. Okay. And it's literally a red dot on a paper plan. The challenge is now they're trying to chase lines in the field because they had a water leak, and they're chasing. Here's a disconnect. They go down the hall a little bit further. Here's another disconnect, because they're turning them, trying to shut it off, and it's not shutting off. Wow. Okay. The problem is all they're doing is putting a blue dot on the ceiling. Well, what's that blue dot? Is it chill water supply? Is it chill water return? Is it even hot water or cold water? I have no idea, and that's the blind spots. And I think the lack of information in the field, like this slide, is it can snowball, and it's slowing teams down, and the operating costs go up. Here's a real story too. It's the importance of why. I always say that it's the setting up the problem is one thing, but it's the why you're doing that. And here's a good example is this is a hospital, right? Oh, setting up for surgeries in the morning. They lose power in one of the ORs, right? They call the guy who's he's a third shift guy. He's brand new. Doesn't know this building at all. He's been on the job for 4 days. All he asked her was, what's the panel sticker that's on the outlet? Just one outlet. She goes in there and says, it's panel 1NLB. He searches on his phone. And again, this is a proactive approach. In this case, it's our app, but he does a search for that panel and it shows him that pin that you see in the bottom center there, where that one panel is. He goes right there, gets the power back on. Think about it. If they don't have something like that, whether it's shutoffs or equipment or a panel, what's the ramification? They can't operate. Okay. So again, when I'm telling you this story, and the reason I'm telling you this is back to what we were saying. That's a story you tell your leadership. It's here's the why. If we don't do this, and this is a perfect example. I tell people to catalog these stories. These are the stories you tell your leadership so that they understand, because I tell anybody this story, they get it. They immediately get it because it's real.
Well, and that's a great story. You just like that third shift person who's been there for 4 days, credit to the organization and to that person, even though it's flipping that switch after 4 days, it's still kind of a big thing. It's maybe a little bit well-trained.
Yeah.
Third shift, sometimes it's the graveyard and you could be in trouble.
Yeah.
But this person
Yeah.
after 4 days, credit.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, is it goes to how are you getting your new people up to speed as well? Okay. Because, I hire somebody, like we said earlier, one building, you know one building, one hospital, one hospital. It's the building layout and the critical details about each building are different. So how are you documenting that information so the new hire hits the ground running day one? And so again, we talked about that institutional knowledge loss and the challenge. And again, we talked about some of those real world examples, but what are the benefits of proactive action? And it comes down to smoother transition during retirements, meaning it's not ripping the Band-Aid off and now it's, Bob's gone or Carl's gone or John's gone. And now we got to figure it out. No, it's proactive, but it also helps to improve efficiency for your team to make those decisions easier and more knowledgeable about the building. So they're not guessing all the time and they're not necessarily tracing all those lines all the time. It also helps with predictable maintenance to reduce that downtime, and also better budgeting for long-term capital planning. Gives leadership and your entire team a heads up of what you need to fix down the road, because now you have a clear asset inventory, clear what's in the field today, and a tool for your team to update moving forward. And then also helps you create that competitive edge. It's so frustrating for many organizations and many new hires when they come in and they're blind and they're shadowing somebody for 3 months, 6 months, a year, just trying to figure out where stuff is. Well, imagine they flip the switch on and day one, they know where everything is. That's what we're talking about here. And here's another story. Again, K through 12, right? Brand new person, just started, have an incident at a school on a Saturday, right? She's only been on the job a few weeks, right? Fire department rolls up, the AC unit's on the roof, it's on fire, right? So they call the on-call number. She rolls up. She's only been on the job a few weeks. And he says, we need to find the panel to kill the power for this thing. She goes, oh, okay. Pulls her phone out of her pocket, says, okay, it's here. Here's a photo of it. Here's the breaker. You got to switch. Room's filled with smoke. Okay. She unlocks the door, shows them exactly. It's in the back corner, right back there. They go over there, kill the breaker. The fire department flipped out. They said, oh my gosh, we don't know your building. We roll up. We're going to start trying to dump water on this thing. I can't even kill power to the thing. And you can do this? She goes, oh yeah, I can do this in all my schools. Yeah. That's how a proactive approach can mitigate some of that risk, some of that damage. Is now I cannot just share it within my team and my organization. I'm sharing with first responders. That's right. A big deal.
Yeah.
So again, it comes down to that accurate. Where is that stuff? How do I access that information? and access makes the difference. It's not just about capturing the stuff, it's accessing it when it counts. And modern facilities teams are able to find all their drawings on a phone, on a tablet. They can find all that legacy information. They can also document all their shutoffs, all their equipment live in the field while they're standing in front of the unit, make, model, serial number, but to capture all of that live. And if something changes, the team should be able to change it too, live when they're in the field, not have to hoof it back to their car and then go back, drive back to the office and remember, because I got called away 15 times between there and the office to remember, what did I do this morning? That was 10 work orders ago. No, document it live and even link to create a video. I just talked to somebody this morning. Anything that they find that's out of the ordinary, they create a video and link it to the actual mapped information for their actual piece of equipment live while they're standing there. That's a big deal. Yeah. So what are you saying and what have you heard about situations of documenting and those and some of those problems that they're solving?
Yeah, I mean, I want to go back to like your slide, like 3 or 4, and it was your bottom box where you talked about like the technology part of it. And I think that, as we talk about losing people, like this next generation, and I'm sure they expect what you have just described. And they are much less tolerant if it doesn't exist. And I think that, as we talk about organizations kind of changing how they look at things, that is a competitive advantage. If you don't have the technology, the younger generation of workers, they are much less tolerant of what they would consider to be inefficiency, and they're going to move on. So not only, by documentation, by field documentation, not only is it the right thing to do, because in a hospital, in a dorm, you don't have time to go searching. Like you don't have time to search for plans that probably don't exist. And if they do exist, they're probably outdated because they're never updated. We're in an industry where seconds matter. And I've heard the stories, and I'm sure you've heard the stories, and I'm not going to repeat them here, but there by the grace of God goes like a huge conflagration, but you've avoided it at the last minute, sometimes by dumb luck. You've found the shutoff, or maybe it's the guy who's been there 45 years who finds it, but nobody else does, and they happen to be there. In a hospital that doesn't have the documentation, you're asking for issues. It's going to rise.
Yeah. And if you don't have a tool to do it in the first place, nothing's going to change. And great. Now I've just had another problem I can't document, or I found something else I can't document. And if I'm relying on one guy to remember, or 3 guys to remember where something happened, 10 years ago, we just talked about that earlier. Those are the guys who are leaving too.
Right.
And it's not always the guy who's been there 20 years. Sometimes it's the guy who's been there for 5, but he also was there when something happened and remembers, that shutoff or even that main is in the southeast corner of the building and it's under mulch. It's what happens.
David, too, and just think like the field documentation that you're able to do, the field asset documentation that our teams does, that's really important because, we're talking about how we're losing people. I talk to enough people, I'm sure you do too, even at the MEP, even at your MEP, the mechanical, electrical, plumber, engineers who may be supplying your building with those plans. How many times do we find that they haven't loaded correctly for a chiller? And you open up a hospital and you have a chiller that's already failed on the first day. So you can't even always, I'm not an engineer, I'm not trying to throw shade at them, but the workplaces change. Sometimes even on those MEP drawings that might be brand spanking new, you can't always trust them.
That's right.
Forget ones from 20 years ago, which is why eyes in the field is critical.
Yeah. And new buildings doesn't mean it's going to operate any better than old buildings in some cases.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I hear failures all the time of, like you said, a chiller goes down or my cooling towers go down or whatever, because they didn't even test the load, and Yeah, I mean, that's why commissioning is such a big deal, but I'm a firm believer too. Document that stuff before you take occupancy too. Okay. If you're not asking for that in advance,
Yeah.
you're setting your team up for failure. And it's because I would rather document stuff when the grid's open than document stuff when I've got to figure out, I'm popping 10 tiles trying to trace lines to figure it out because I'm waiting for 6 months to get the closeout package for that drawing, for that project. I'm operating blind.
Yeah, and the race to the finish line at the end of the project is horrific because you got
Yeah.
leadership saying go 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 faster faster. You're trying to make your subcon. Everybody's in a rush, and you just want
Yeah.
to get that seat. You want to get that certificate of occupancy. But like you said, sometimes you forget kind of the fundamentals that you really need to operate that building from day one.
Exactly. Exactly. And, I look at this from this slide here is the what if you don't slide.
Hmm.
So that risk of inaction. So it's that operational continuity. My team just can't function correctly. My operation can't function correctly or the way we want it to function. And sometimes that's increased equipment downtime due to poor documentation. I have no visibility to what's out in the field. So how can I plan for replacements, plan for PMs? And it also can be expensive emergency repairs. We've all paid for it. I can't tell you how many organizations I've talked to that said, oh my gosh, we had this equipment fail. We knew it was going to fail. We just didn't know when. And then when it failed, now I had to pay overnight charges to get that pump, or I had to, outsource this, outsource that, or I had to go rent this or rent that. And I'll show what that could look like here in a minute. But also it creates this snowball of now how am I supposed to onboard people and train staff when that ramp up time of getting them to even know and acclimated to our building takes so long. So now I'm basically paying somebody to shadow somebody. So that's two people doing the same job for how long? And also the inability to meet compliance and audit standards is, I just talked to somebody the other day that was in a hospital and they just took occupancy a couple of months ago. Joint Commission just showed up.
Yeah.
No documentation for they haven't even got the closeout package yet. Thank goodness they didn't find anything major, but they still found some stuff. But they found stuff that would have been preventable if they would have had this up front before they actually took occupancy. So part of the other challenge, underlying challenge is old buildings, old ways, old buildings, old stuff. 65% of buildings still have paper stuff all over the place. 1 in 3 buildings is over 50 years old. 70% are over 20 years old. But that also means old stuff, old mix of old and new. It's been replaced, decommissioned, new, or it's been moved. All right. We see this all the time. Well, I think it's up here. It's actually 3 rooms down where that fan coil is, but it supports these rooms. No one documented it. So again, equipment also is breaking. All right. A lot of old equipment I hear is down. It's fallen off and the equipment lifespan over time is not getting any better. So proper planning and documenting what's really out there can save you a ton of time and a ton of money. The flip side is if you don't, this is the story, right? Unit broke on a Monday, 10 o'clock in the morning. Couldn't get it repaired. New replacement unit ordered, but again, wasn't budgeted, but it's been ordered. The rental unit was delivered 4 days later, $10,000 a month, right? It sat there for 18 months because the unit was back ordered that they ordered to replace it. Do that math. Okay. Was that budgeted? Of course not. Right. But they still have to have that rental sitting there for 18 months, paying 10 grand a month. That's a big number. So the cost of deferred maintenance is every $1, and these are some stats, and you've got the sources there, but $1 deferred maintenance can be $4 in future repair costs. 65% of that critical equipment failures is preventable with scheduled maintenance. You're regularly out there. All right. Proactive planning can reduce OPEX by 10 to 15% annually. But the risks of inaction, again, is that deferred maintenance increases long-term can cost 400% more, right? Equipment failure means lost productivity, safety. Again, it's that risk of an organization. And also heat maps to highlight those risk areas. Remember, I was talking about the photos showing if we lose this unit, it means this whole area is out, is out of commission. So talk about some of the ways that you've seen teams troubleshooting and they just didn't have access to information and something went sideways.
Yeah, yeah, good way to describe it. So, as you were talking, one of the things I think that really, like, especially in healthcare, and I'm sure you see it when you're out there, is the changing occupancy of spaces. How you're dealing with joint commission, airflow, and we change a wall here, we change a wall here, we lights it, and then you're going. It's never documented, right? Somebody just does it. Maybe it's caught in a survey, but like these are all the challenges that you're helping and we're helping to solve for us because you just do it in the field, but it's got these downstream impacts because nothing is easy in a hospital. It all has an impact, and every move, and the people who are seasoned directors, they know this. But as we bring people in who don't, they're not going to know that. Oh, yeah, I can change that space for you. We can make that an office. Well, what are if you don't know the questions to ask, you're going to get in trouble. And this picture is great, David. I really love it. It reminds I love food. It reminds me of like a goulash, but yeah, we had, and it's so true. I remember, so I was a PM. We were doing an ED renovation and we had no drawings. We didn't know what was outside the building. And our site contractor, honest to God, 3 days in a row, just would hit your telephone line, would hit gas. We closed him down. I remember my boss was like, it was a come to Jesus moment. He's like, if you hit one more thing, you're off the site. Get it mapped. We can't do it. We just didn't have it. And we get these hodgepodges of hospitals, especially up in my area in the Northeast. You might build one in 1950, then you add on one in 1980, then there's 1987. And like you said, you have all of these different mixtures. And when we get them, we never marry them and we never
Yeah.
figure out what we have. So, man, it's funny. I'm not trying to go to kind of like the negative because it's just, but without the accurate documentation, this is what you deal with.
Yeah.
You're on
Yeah.
that
And
line.
it's the daily. I mean,
Yeah.
it is, you and I talked prior to the recording here about, some incidences where I'm seeing people ripping down old buildings that are 100 years old on a campus, and they're out there with a backhoe hitting lines left and right, gas lines,
It's not
water
funny. Yeah.
lines.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a picture that one guy sent me, and I gotta watch. I don't want to say who they were, but he showed me it was a geyser, coming off when they hit it with the backhoe, and no documentation showing where this stuff was. Well, it shut down 3 other buildings that they weren't ripping down. Now they're trying to stopgap that problem. And I'm a firm believer of field verified assets. And you were talking about different things that have changed over time. One of the things that we do is we layer all those different changes on top, so you can see all the different renovations and all those drawing sets showing where they touched, and then all the stuff that's outside the buildings all mapped out too. But this is a great example. These 3 guys, the guy on the left there is the director. He'd been there for quite a while, but those other 2 guys are brand new, and they're walking around documenting where stuff is, right? And again, time is never easy for any facilities group, but you have to take the time. But also, more importantly, is if you're going to partner with somebody like CREF or with ARC, it's make sure that they do the baseline, get that stuff out there, document that stuff. We do this all the time. I'm in the field all the time, mapping stuff out for clients, but also teaching them how they can find the other stuff. We're going to miss something. You're going to miss something. Okay, but documenting what's really out there in current conditions is the big deal. And the benefits of that are proactive, smoother transitions during retirements and that turnover, improve team efficiency. Guys get more stuff done. It helps you do some of those predictable things, again, to reduce that downtime. Helps with budgeting and that long-term planning, but also gives you that competitive edge for recruiting. And these are some of the steps, and I'm going to blow through these because we're up against our time here. But again, steps to retain that. Proactive, start documenting that stuff. Start today. Scan and digitize, get paperless, right? Choose a platform that's easy. If it's not easy, team's not going to use it, right? They're going to shelve it.
Very true.
Yeah, exactly. Make sure they can access it on the thing that's in everybody's pocket, their phone. All right. Single source, one resource, everybody can get it. But your new hires are all tech savvy. They were born with a smartphone. So give them the tool that they're used to using, and also reduce that ramp up time for new hires. Everybody has access day one. And new team members can really do their job. You're an electrician, let them be an electrician, not have to hunt for panels. All right. So again, set your team up for success. Invest in that one-stop shop, one location where everything lives. Close that loop so everybody's on the same page. The guy who's been there for 30 years knows where the same stuff is. The guy who started last week, right? Train your team to document changes as they find stuff. It's that SOP. Set it up so that the next question out of your mouth is, oh, you fix that thing? Great. Did you document it? That's part of your vocabulary, right? Because now you're setting your team up for success, and the next person who has to come in behind that person also sees that stuff. But everybody has access 24/7. And Peter, let's wrap this up with, what advice would you give someone who's really looking at future-proofing their facilities?
So David, I'm going to come at it just from a people angle, and I'm going to make it really quickly. We've talked a lot in this show about what we don't have. We don't have enough people. Organizations sometimes, though, they forget to deal with what they do have, the people they have. And I saw this in recruiting, and I see it today with Craft. Educate and train your employees. Give them opportunities for growth. Talk to them. Ask them what their career aspirations are and support that, and give them a work-life balance. Don't forget about what you have, because you got to keep them. Because like you said, David, if somebody offers them $5 more, $3 more, they may stay with you because you've created a good environment for them.
Right. I couldn't agree more. I think at the end of the day, it's people and process. You're going to keep your people if you're not making their life harder. Right? You're making it work-life balance is I'm not having to work a ton of overtime because we don't have those processes. You're setting your organization up for success. So, Indira, let's open it up for some questions.
All right, thank you both. Let's go ahead and dive in here. First question I have, we are losing three key people this year and one more next year to retirements. Can people use this type of system to document the knowledge, and do you help?
Yeah, I'll grab that one. Yes, the answer to that is yes. You need to. This tool that I'm showing is obviously our tool, but at the end of the day, it's meant to document stuff as they find stuff. I'm going to spin that question around a little bit. Is think about the people that are on your team that are about a year, whatever, into that retirement window. They're a year away from retirement. How much of your building's institutional knowledge is in those people's heads? Meaning, think about your team. You've got 20 people on your team. Is 90% of your institutional knowledge in 3 people's heads? This stops that. Everybody's on the same page, and it's leveling that playing field a little bit for your team. So you're not scrambling, trying to do those break fixes, because the guy that knows where everything is on vacation, and now everybody's scrambling trying to figure it out. No, everything's documented. Everybody can respond when it counts.
And I have a comment here. Love that you said not everyone needs to go to college. The trades are a career path. From what you've both seen, what are the most needed trades right now?
Yeah, Peter, you want to grab that one?
Yeah, the electricians, HVAC techs, plumbers, your MEP and the HVAC guys by far, because you can get hired right away. You can get hired right away by a hospital or contractors. Everybody needs them.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear the exact same thing.
And someone asked Peter about, you had mentioned a healthcare facilities network. Is that where people can go listen to? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Oh, thank you. Sure. Yeah, no. So it's on YouTube. It's David's been on it. So I have 2 episodes with David. We're trying to solve for the issue by promoting this opportunity. It's called the Healthcare Facilities Network. If you search for it on YouTube, we talk to leaders from all over the industry, different hospitals, what they're doing to try to solve it. We talked to knowledgeable guys, thought leaders like David. I'll end it here because we're over time, but you can find it on YouTube, Healthcare Facilities Network. It is all about healthcare facilities, our nerdy little world that we all love. That's what we're committed to.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks for telling us about that.
Thank you.
And for any questions we didn't get to, we'll reach out to you individually. You can contact David here, ARC Facilities, all our information's here. For those of you who haven't yet listened in on the Facility Voices podcast, that's a great place to hear stories from all over the facilities world. David, of course, hosts that particular podcast. And then we have Peter's information here. Feel free to reach out to Peter, visit cref.com to learn more about them. And David, anything else before we wrap up?
Now, thank you, Peter, for joining me today. And thank you to the audience. We appreciate you listening, and reach out to both of us. We're happy to see what we can do to help your organization.
Thank you, David. And thank you to the audience as well.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.